What's going on, YouTube, and welcome back to Goal Line Hockey. It's your boy Kevin Forte, and today we are going to be taking a look at the Eastern Conference playoff positioning. Who is going to get that final spot in the wild card in the Eastern Conference? So we're going to be taking a look at that today, looking at each team's schedule, and we're going to kind of figure out who we think is most likely going to get in. Guys, if you like this kind of content, want to see more content going into the Stanley Cup playoffs, make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel. And let's get into this. So, let's take a look at the NHL standings right now. So there we go. So looking in the Eastern Conference wild card playoff race right now, it is pretty clear who is going to be in that first wild card spot. Well, at least to this point, it's going to be Tampa Bay or Toronto. And that's pretty much it. So either Tampa or Toronto is going to be either third in the Atlantic or first in the wild card. And at this point, it's pretty set that the Metropolitan 1 and 2 is pretty much set. And then whoever gets that second wild card spot. Now, I would say it's definitely going to be a Metropolitan Division team, but the Red Wings are still in the chase there. So kind of looking at the standings, I would say that there's going to be a couple teams disappointed. But I would say the Penguins are the last team in that mix. The Penguins are the last hope for playoffs. Everybody else under Pittsburgh that is not highlighted is likely out. Because if you look at the points, right? Tampa has 93. The Islanders have 83. They're 10 points back of the first and second wild card spots. So, I'm sure that means a lot to the first team in the Atlantic, or the first team in the East, right? Because that's either the Rangers or the Bruins that is going to get Tampa or the Islanders or whoever that second wild card is. Winning the Eastern Conference is going to mean something this year. And that's kind of why, looking at the standings here, you look at the standings, just how tight they are. Now, technically, the Flyers are in this as well, because if you look at third place in the Metropolitan Division, you got the Flyers. And the Flyers have 36 wins. The Islanders have 34, which has kind of been a setback, but they're still hanging out. They're still hanging in there. And then you got the Capitals with 36, the Red Wings with 37, and then the Penguins with 35. So all of those teams are within 2 or 3 games of each other, and it is just oh so close. And those games in hand that the Capitals had have kind of dissipated, because now they're only 1 game back of the Penguins and the Flyers and the Islanders, who have all played 1 more game. So the Red Wings and the Caps have played 75. Everybody else on that list there has played 76. And the other thing we need to look at here before we can decide who is playing best, right? We need to look at how these teams perform home and away. So at home, things have not been so great for the Flyers, actually. They've actually played a little bit better on the road. And you look at their last 10 games, 2-5-3 on a 5-game losing streak. Yikes, yeah. That's not too great for the Flyers, right? The Islanders, hey, listen, they're still in the hunt, baby. 3-game winning streak, but they are still 5-5 in their last 10 games. For the Caps, they're on a 4-game losing skid, but they're 5-4-1. And then the Red Wings have kind of been back and forth, but they're 4-4-2. And the Penguins have been surging a little bit. They're on a 3-game winning streak. They beat the Rangers. They beat the Devils. And now, most recently, they've beaten the Washington Capitals. 3 Metropolitan Division opponents, all 3 of them on the road. The Penguins are still in the hunt, thanks to Sidney Crosby and the rest of the group there. The Penguins are still in the hunt. And what's really interesting with Pittsburgh is Alex Nedeljkovic has really given the Penguins life, and if they make the playoffs, he might be one of the underrated goalies that really might be a tough matchup in the first round for whoever they play. And that is not something I would have expected to tell you even 2 weeks ago. That has been a very recent development in Pittsburgh. Now, another really glaring thing to look at for the Penguins is, despite their record on the road not being so good, like I just said, 3 tough games on the road, and they won all 3 of them. So imagine before that 3-game road trip here, technically they were 12, 17, and 7 last week on the road. So things can turn around quickly in that regard. The Capitals have been much better at home. The Islanders kind of in the middle both ways. Not really too impressive one way or the other. So it's really interesting to see the drop between the first wild card and the second, right? It's crazy to see that gap. So we're really not going to be talking much about Tampa or Toronto today. Let's look at the Flyers schedule. So looking at the Flyers schedule, the remainder of this season, okay? Let's take a look at the remainder of their schedule. So let's head down to the bottom. So there is your final matchups for the Philadelphia Flyers. So they play Buffalo, Columbus, Montreal, and the Rangers all on the road. Yikes. I can tell you right off the bat, those are some easier teams other than the Rangers. But, man, that's a 4-game road trip right at the end of the season. Now, here's the good thing for the Flyers. Those are not terribly far. Those are all fairly close teams, so they're not going to a new time zone or anything like that. The only thing is they're going to have to go through customs when they go to Montreal. But other than that, not terribly difficult of a road trip to end the season. And then, of course, their final 2 games are against the Devils and Capitals. Now, the easy way to look at this schedule is, well, Buffalo, Columbus, Montreal, and the Devils are not making the playoffs. So 4 of the final 6 opponents for the Flyers season are non-playoff teams. And at this point, at the making of this video, the Capitals are also not a playoff team. So 5 of the final 6 games of the regular season, the Flyers are playing non-playoff teams. Okay? So that's important to look at. Now, 4 of those 6 games are also on the road. So that is what we're going to look at for the Flyers. And, like we said, they're also on a 5-game losing streak. So let's look at the Islanders. The Islanders are the other team in a playoff spot. So what do we have for the Islanders, okay? So the Islanders, final couple games, a little bit of a different schedule. The Islanders play the Predators at home, the Rangers twice, one at UBS, one at MSG. So that's going to be 2 tough games for the Islanders. Then they play Montreal, then they play New Jersey in Newark, and then they play the Pittsburgh Penguins on the final game of the season on April 17th. So, Nashville in the playoffs. The Rangers, those are 2 in the playoffs. That's it. So, half of the Islanders' schedule, with 2 of those games being against the Rangers, 3 of their final 6 games are against playoff teams, which means Montreal, New Jersey, and Pittsburgh should be wins. But we know that word should. That is a cursed word here at Goal Line Hockey. But that is something to watch. So that is your Islanders schedule. Again, 2 games on the road, but they're both a bus trip away. The Islanders do not have to take a plane for the remainder of this season. The Rangers and the Devils are all across the backyard for the Islanders. And like I said, none of those are easy. Nashville, that's a good team right now. They've been struggling a little bit. They're probably going to look for this game, this road trip, as kind of a way to kind of get back on track and away from the home distractions. That's going to be a tough one for the Islanders. Of course, both games against the Rangers, the Islanders have not fared well against the Rangers this season, just matchup-wise. It's been rough. The Islanders are going to try and avoid getting swept by the Rangers for the season series in both of those games. Montreal should be a win. The Islanders struggled against Montreal earlier this season and actually lost the game up in Montreal, so that's not a given. The Devils, well, the last time the Islanders played the Devils, Kaapo Kähkönen got a shutout on the Islanders at UBS Arena, so there's no guarantee win there. And the Penguins might seem like actually the easiest game, as crazy as that sounds, but even the Penguins right now are on a 3-game winning streak, and they just took care of business against the Rangers, Devils, and Capitals. That's no easy win either, especially if Alex Nedeljkovic is in between the pipes. So that's the Islanders' schedule. So 2 road games for the Islanders, 4 road games for the Flyers, or 2 road games for the Islanders, 4 for the Flyers. Now let's look at the Caps. And I believe the Capitals, we just did a video on the Caps, I do believe the Capitals will have the most difficult schedule out of this bunch of teams. So they play Carolina. That's pretty easy. That's a tough game. Ottawa. Same thing as the Islanders' schedule with Montreal. It should be a win, but they are a tough matchup, especially for the Caps. And then a couple of road games here. They play Detroit and Buffalo. Detroit's on the outside looking in, so we talked about that. That's a 4-point game. Buffalo, kind of a tough team to kind of decipher, like Ottawa. Those are wild card games, but that should be 4 points between Ottawa and Buffalo. You got to win those games. And then the rest of their schedule, Tampa Bay, Boston, and at Philadelphia, which probably is going to determine the season for the Caps. So the Caps have 2 games that are 4-point games. At Detroit on April 9th and at Philadelphia on April 16th. And those are going to be really difficult games because both the Red Wings and the Flyers are also, just like the Caps, fighting for their playoff lives. Now, this game in Carolina, that's going to be a tough one. That's a playoff team. Ottawa, non-playoff team. Detroit, non-playoff team. Buffalo, non-playoff team. And then Tampa, Boston, and Philly, at the moment, are all playoff teams. So 3 of their final 6 games are, or 3 of their final 7 opponents, excuse me. Wait, no, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so 1, I apologize. So 4 of their final 7 games are against playoff teams. So again, kind of a difficult schedule there compared in terms of standing wise to the Islanders and the Flyers. And then the final team we're going to, well, there's 2 more we have to look at, Detroit and Pittsburgh. So Detroit, the Red Wings schedule the rest of the way. The Capitals and the Red Wings each have 7 games left on their schedule. The Islanders, the Flyers, and somebody else, and the Penguins each only have 6 games left because they've played their 76th game already. So let's look at the schedule for the Red Wings tonight. Or this is tomorrow for you guys, but tomorrow, the Rangers play the Red Wings. That's a big game, or last night's game for you. I apologize. I make these videos in advance. So last night's game, which would be the Ranger game, they play the Rangers, Buffalo, Washington, Pittsburgh, Toronto, Montreal twice. So the Rangers, that's a playoff team. Buffalo, non-playoff. Washington, technically non-playoff. Same thing for Pittsburgh. Toronto, playoff team. And then back-to-back with Montreal, both non-playoff teams. So, hypothetically, 2 of the final 7 games for the Red Wings are non-playoff teams. And what really helps that out is the cushion at the end of the schedule with the back-to-back with the Montreal Canadiens. That is 4 points that the Red Wings must have. Depending on what happens in some of these other games, right? Washington and Pittsburgh are right there with the Red Wings. Those are 2 critical games for the Red Wings. I would say the 4 of the final 5 games of the season are what's going to make this season for the Red Wings, right? It's important that you somehow win games against the Rangers, Buffalo, and Toronto. But I'm going to tell you right now, the Washington and Pittsburgh games and the 2 games against Montreal will determine the season for the Red Wings. If the Red Wings can split those 2 games at the end of the season with Montreal and win both games against Washington and Pittsburgh, I think they get in. But if they lose one of those games against Washington and Pittsburgh, they must win those final 2 games against Montreal. And it might even take more than that. So, looking at their schedule, right? 2 of their final 7 opponents are playoff teams. So that theoretically should be wins. But again, with Washington and Pittsburgh, they're non-playoff teams that are right there. And they might actually end up making the playoffs by the end of it all. And then Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh is the most threatening team, at least at the moment, because Alex Nedeljkovic has played great. Look at all these games for Ned. He has played 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 straight games. And look at this. This is a tight schedule here for the Penguins, right? That's, there's only one back-to-back there, but Ned played both games in that back-to-back. And then their 3rd game in 4 nights, Ned also played that game. So just to put that in perspective, we've seen a lot of Alex Nedeljkovic this season, especially recently, right? Mike Sullivan has gone with the hot hand. So they play Tampa, Toronto, Detroit, Boston, Nashville, and the New York Islanders. So Tampa, playoff team. Toronto, playoff team. Boston, playoff team. Nashville, playoff team. Islanders, playoff team. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 of their final 6 games are technically playoff teams. And the one quote-unquote cupcake is the Red Wings, who are 1 point ahead of the Pittsburgh Penguins. So that is your situation with the schedule. Whoops, my bad, guys. That was the wrong screen. That is what we're looking at right now for the playoffs. So theoretically, the Penguins, 5 of their final 6 opponents are playoff teams. 2 of the final 7 opponents for the Red Wings are playoff teams. And then we went through the other ones, right? So in terms of schedule, the Penguins have the toughest schedule out of this bunch in terms of playoff teams and non-playoff teams. But that's kind of hard to look at because, well, teams like Pittsburgh are on the schedule and Washington for some of them, but they're non-playoff teams at the making of this video. So it's kind of hard to scale that one. But everything is in their destiny for each of these teams because there's 4-point games in there against these other teams that they're battling with. This is going to be some great hockey over the final 2 weeks of the season, specifically in the Eastern Conference. I'm really interested to see what happens here. I want to know what you guys think. Who do you guys think is going to get that final spot in the 3rd spot in the Metropolitan and the final spot in the Eastern Conference? Because if the Red Wings go in there and end up making that second wildcard spot, that's going to throw everybody in the Metro in a tizzy. Because now they have to get that 3rd Metro spot to make the playoffs, and they can't rely on the wildcard spot cushion, which also not favorable. Because as much as Carolina, like this is the thing, whoever gets those 2 spots, it's going to be really difficult to win in those scenarios. Either the Metro, the third spot in the Metro, you play the red hot Hurricanes, or you're going to play the red hot Rangers. That's going to be really difficult. No matter where you put it, it's going to be difficult for whoever gets in. But I want to know your guys' thoughts. My opinion, I'm going to go with the 3rd spot in the Metro. I do believe, this is going to sound crazy, I think the Penguins will end up getting the 3rd spot in the Metropolitan Division. When it happens, let me know. I think they're going to get that spot. They've been the hottest team out of the bunch. And then you've got the second wild card. And I'm sorry, Red Wing fans, I don't think the Red Wings are going to get in. Which now leaves me with the Capitals, the Flyers, and the Islanders. The Flyers. The Flyers are the team that scares me the most in terms of they just don't have any real direction, and they have sputtered so far. They had such a good start to the season, but ultimately, I think this team is broken, and I do not think the Flyers will get in. So that leaves me with the Capitals and the New York Islanders. The Capitals are on a 3-game losing streak right now. The Islanders are on a 3-game winning streak. But recently, the Capitals have found their way back into the playoff positioning. They had a really good Western Canadian road trip. They beat some really good teams. They beat Vancouver. They beat teams like Winnipeg. Yes, they've lost a couple games here. They're on a 4-game losing skid. But I think they're the team that ends up getting into that final wild card spot. So the final wild card spot will go to the Washington Capitals. I'm sorry, I love my Islanders. And a lot of you probably are thinking, Kevin, you didn't pick the Islanders. How dare you? I'm going to go with the Capitals getting that final wild card spot. And I think the Penguins are going to shock some people here. Sidney Crosby's been playing well. Nedeljkovic seems to be getting things going in between the pipes. He's doing enough. The Penguins are hot right now. And I think the Pittsburgh Penguins, that game in Colorado, I think it was 2 weeks ago, they blew a 3-goal lead in the 3rd period. I think that was the game that set the tone alarm for this team. They have turned it around. I think they're going to play Carolina in the first round of the Stanley Cup playoffs and end up snagging that 3rd spot in the Metro. So that's going to do it for today's video, guys. Hopefully you like it. If you like this video, want to see more content like this, make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe down below. Guys, as always, thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you again next time. Peace out, guys.